Therefore, from what has been said, we must accept that in the divine nature, three persons exist, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and that these three are one God, distinguished only by their relations to one another. For the Father is distinguished from the Son by the relationship of paternity, and by the fact that he is not born. But the Son is from the Father by relation of filiation. But the Father and the Son by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, as it may be said. But the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son in a procession of love, by which he proceeds from both. Besides these three persons, it is not necessary to place a fourth in the divine nature. For the divine persons, when they are united in essence, cannot be distinguished except by relation of origin, as is clear from what has been said. Now we must accept these relations of origin, not according to a procession tending outwards, for thus proceeding would not be coessential to its beginning, but the procession must consist internally. But the fact that something proceeds while remaining within its principle is found only in the operation of the intellect and the will, as is clear from what has been said. Hence the divine persons can only be multiplied according to what is required by the procession of the intellect and the will in God. Now it is not possible that in God there should be but one procession according to the understanding, because his understanding is one and simple and perfect, because by understanding himself he understands all other things, and so there can only be one procession of the Word in God. In the same way, the procession of love must be only one, because to will the divine is also one and simple. For by loving oneself, one loves all other things. It is therefore not possible for there to be in God except two persons proceeding, one by way of the understanding as the Word, that is the Son, and others by way of love, such as the Holy Spirit. There is also one person who does not come forward, that is the Father. Therefore there can be only three persons in the Trinity. There is also one person who does not come forward, that is the Father. Therefore there can be only three persons in the Trinity. There is also one person who does not come forward, that is the Father. Therefore there can be only three persons in the Trinity. Again, if according to the procession the divine persons must be distinguished, but the manner of a person as regards processions can only be threefold, that is to say that it is either not proceeding at all, which is the Father's, or proceeding from the non-proceeding, which is the Son's, or proceeding from the proceeding, which is the Holy Spirit. It is therefore impossible to posit more than three persons. Although in other living things the relations of origin may be multiplied, so that in human nature there are many fathers and many sons, this is absolutely impossible in the divine nature. For the filiation, since it is in one nature of one species, cannot be multiplied except according to matter or subject, as is also the case with other forms. Hence, since in God there is no matter or subject, and the relations themselves should be subsisting, as is clear from what has been said above, it is impossible that there should be more sons in God, and the same is true of others. And so there are only three persons in God. But if any objector should say that in the Son, since God is perfect, there is perfect intellectual power, and thus he can produce the Word. And in the same way, since there is infinite goodness in the Holy Spirit, which is the principle of communication, he will be able to communicate the divine nature of the divine person to another. He must consider that the Son is God as begotten, not as begetting, whence intellectual power is in him as in proceeding by the manner of the Word, not as in the producing Word. And likewise, since the Holy Spirit is God as proceeding, there is infinite goodness in him as in the receiving person, not as in imparting infinite goodness to another, for they are not distinguished from one another except by relations alone, as is clear from what has been said above. Therefore the whole fullness of the divinity is in the Son, and in the same number as is in the Father, but with regard to the relation of birth, as in the Father, with the relation of active generation. Hence, if the relationship of the Father were attributed to the Son, all distinction would be removed. And the same is true of the Holy Spirit. Now we can consider the similitude of this divine Trinity in the human mind. For the mind itself, from the fact that it actually understands itself, conceives its word in itself, which is nothing else than the very intention of the intelligible mind, which is also called the understood mind, existing in the mind. As long as it further loves itself, it produces itself in the will as the beloved. Now it does not proceed further within itself, but is closed in a circle, while through love it returns to the very substance from which the procession began, through the intention understood. But it becomes a procession to external effects, while it proceeds from self-love to do something, and thus three things are found in the mind itself, which is the beginning of the procession, existing in its own nature, and the mind conceived in the understanding, and the beloved mind in the will. However, these three are not of one nature, because the understanding of the mind is not its being, nor is his will to be or to understand. And for this reason also the mind understood and the mind loved are not persons, since they are not subsisting. Even the mind itself, existing in its own nature, is not a person, since it is not the whole of what subsists, but a part of what subsists, namely man. In our mind, then, we find the similitude of the divine Trinity as far as the procession is concerned, which multiplies the Trinity, since it is evident from what has been said that there is a God begotten in the divine nature, who is the beginning of the whole divine procession, that is, the Father, and God begotten by the manner of the Word conceived in the understanding, that is, the Son, and God proceeding by way of love, that is, the Holy Spirit. Further, no procession is found within the divine nature, but only a procession into external effects. In this, however, it falls short of the representation of the divine Trinity, that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are of one nature, and each of these has a perfect person, in that they understand and will the divine being itself, as has been shown. And for this reason, the divine similitude in man is thus considered as the similitude of Hercules in stone, as regards the representation of form, not so much as to the conformity of nature. Hence it is said that in the mind of man is the image of God. According to Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image and likeness. A similitude of the divine Trinity is also found in other things, as each thing is one in its substance and is formed in a certain manner, and it has some order. Now, as is evident from what has been said, the conception of the intellect in intelligible being is like the information of a species in a natural being, but love is like an inclination or order in a natural thing. Hence also, the species of natural things removed from them represents the Son, but the order the Holy Spirit. And therefore, because of the remote and obscure representation in irrational things, it is said that in them there is a trace of the Trinity, not an image. According to Job 11:7. Can you comprehend the traces of God, and so on? And these things are sufficient for the present concerning the divine Trinity.